Hello, welcome one and all to another Wednesday Planet Coaster Spectacular, in which we are going to be once again revisiting Mistletoe Peak, my Christmas park that I now kind of say with some hesitation because you guys gave me some flack for starting a Christmas park in November. It is the last week of November, to be fair, but nonetheless we did start the Christmas park in November. But in my defense, we only have like if I stick to my schedule of one Planet Coaster video a week, that gives me 4 episodes in which to construct an entire theme park. So I'm starting to either reach the conclusion of we just bite the bullet and extend the series beyond Christmas and just sort of have it as a generic winter park / New Year's park, I suppose. Or I could just make the episodes very, very long, but the downside of that would be there'd be no real focus to each episode. Like, I like to have each episode be revolving around a certain thing. So this episode, for example, although we're doing like odd bits of admin here and there, like we're starting off by finishing off the Ferris wheel, the main focus of this video will be the the gondola cable car, as in, you know, the ski lift type thing. I say cable car with hesitation because Americans don't call them cable cars. I don't know if it's just America or it's like just England that calls them cable cars, but I always thought that cable car was the generic name until, you know, I remembered that the trams in San Francisco were also called cable cars. Bit of a side ramble there, but yeah, like this episode is going to be focused on constructing the cable cars. A couple of episodes time we're going to be building the roller coaster, then the such and such. Whereas if I'm going to get this out before Christmas and I'm going to be sticking to just one episode a week on Wednesdays, then it would have to be like building a roller coaster and a sleigh ride and a bobsleigh and a shop and this, and it's just like there's not. I like there being a focus. So I think I might just make this a generic winter park. And you know, I will be going home over the Christmas period, and so I don't have any other Planet Coaster footage made, so I might have no choice to carry on with Mistletoe Peak after Christmas, at least for a little while, at least for a couple of weeks after, because I won't be around in front of my PC to build more Planet Coaster stuff to generate content, and I haven't got any more footage left of Neptune Park to use. So it's all very exciting things ahead. As you can see, I haven't really talked about what's going on screen, and I'm hoping you could figure it out. Is a recurring sentence, I say, as was that following sentence explaining how I often repeat myself in this series, but regardless, it was just basically dressing up this Ferris wheel. Part of me thinks that now the rest of the park is by the way, the whole park's done. Just I finished the park, so unfortunately any more suggestions aren't going to be taken unless you come up with like a really good idea, and I might just sort of add it retrospectively. But I'm actually really happy with the way the park's come out, so look forward to the releases. And I wanted to get the whole park done very soon in advance, so I know exactly how I'm going to plan out these episodes and decide if I can realistically get the whole series out before Christmas Day. I don't think it will come out before, I will be able to get it done, all done before Christmas, but hopefully it'll be worth it. So here's just a very easy way of dressing up the path, really. The Ferris wheel pretty much marks the back of the park, so it's a fairly small area, so you can tell that me not being able to compress it into like 4-hour-long videos says something about the actual level of detail on it. I know this isn't an hour-long video, but if I was to realistically aim to get everything in 4 episodes, it would easily be over an hour played at this speed. And the footage in this episode is played back a lot faster than I normally play back Planet Coaster videos, again, just try and get as much content in here as possible without feeling too long. So let me know if this is too fast and it's very hard to tell what's going on. Admittedly, at the moment, the construction of the Ferris wheel is not too difficult to follow, but when we get to the construction of the cable car, which will be happening in a bit, I'll probably go back and add a time code or something earlier on in the video, just so you know where to go in case you got clickbaited, son, and thought you were going to be watching a video exclusively about a cable car, not adding that snowman there. So yeah, pretty easy way of dressing up this path, really. Just added some snowmen the guests can have a look at as they go along the path. In the end, there's been some problems with the guests in this park, actually. First of all, my brilliant scheme to get guests to the park by riding the train didn't work all that well, because guests don't automatically get off the train at the stop. They'll often just ride around in the train for a bit and then leave the park without ever getting off at the actual main station to get to the rides. So that was a thing. And also the paths just seem to be completely broken in the park. Like, guests will often just get stuck on nothing. So you'll go around the park and it's like, where are all the guests? And there'll be like clusters of like 50 people in like 1 meter square sections dotted around the park, just stuck on nothing. And I mentioned this on a couple of the Discord servers I'm in about Planet Coaster and some of the forums, and no one had any solutions or had ever seen this glitch before. So that was kind of a bummer. So this park really just looks like a model. So, I mean, Mask Bandit's Christmas Village series, he's basically making it to look like a model Christmas village rather than be a functional park. So it's kind of just for aesthetics only. So let's go with that. Let's go with that as the story. This is now a model village purely because the guests completely broke in this save. So I guess it doesn't need explanation because, first of all, this has been being built for a while now and it's nearly finished. But I've been building a toilet block here. Just disguise the generic blue tiles with some like wooden planks to make it look a little bit more in keeping with the building's rustic aesthetic. Trying to match the overall architectural style of the rest of the Christmas village. So basically just this big kind of lots of ornate stucco, the light coloured stucco wall with wooden paneling and this big tall fairy tale roof, and that pretty much is how you match the architectural style of these buildings. And then I just went with like the pretty generic looking crypt roof. Looks fairly in keeping with the time period that this building looks like it was constructed in. And then of course we can add the little Coca-Cola truck style lighting to the front, and that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the toilet block. Not a lot more to it. We can do a few more cosmetic features here and there, but that's pretty much the toilet block. And then we can get to the actual main part of this video. I didn't realize it was going to be 6 minutes in, actually. I thought it was a little bit... I remembered when I edited this video this morning. I couldn't sleep, so I woke up at like 6 o'clock in the morning and just edited this video, and I've got back from work. So there's been a bit of time between me stitching this footage together and then me going back and doing the commentary. And I remembered it being like, oh, it's only like 3 minutes of intro before we get to the cable car. It turns out I misremembered that somewhat. But doesn't matter, because here we are, 6 minutes 35 seconds in. We can build the cable car itself. So I started out by building the shell using like floor pieces, and again I'm using that little archer guy just to get a sense of scale to make sure I'm building this to like a realistic size relative to the size of the guests in the park. And then we can just use the window pieces to create the glass surround. So I was trying to come up with a way to make the cable car look, obviously it's not going to look fitting with it's not going to look very good if I try and build it to look as old as the rest of the Christmas village does, because that would look dumb, because cable cars didn't exist in the I don't know time period that these buildings are designed. So I kind of went with a sort of 1980s style looking cable car. Like it's not a modern one that's just made of all glass, kind of like a chunky retro-y looking one to kind of show that they've been around for a little while. You know, it's an established thing. So that's why it's closed, because obviously this isn't a real ride, is it? It's just going to be a static thing, and it's closed. Bad weather, it's an old design. They can't cope with blizzards anymore. So that's why the thing's going to be closed for the entire park season. And forever, I guess, because unless Squad. I always want to say unless Squad, but I mean unless Frontier decides to add cable cars, and then I can retrospectively go back and change this entire thing, which realistically I'm not going to be able to be bothered to. So I don't really know what I'm saying here. Let's just talk about something else. What else can we talk about? To be honest, I don't know that much about cable cars to really talk about it. There is a really good, that it is much better than this one, I'll give it that. On the Steam Workshop, there is a gondola cable car. So I had a little download of the Steam Workshop file, had a little look at it, and I really liked the one thing I don't want to say stole, but the one thing I kind of was inspired by was that they used those fiberglass lights to act as a sort of rail guide for the top of the car. I really liked that idea, so I borrowed it. But the rest of the cable car is pretty... I don't think I stole anything else. If I did, it was completely accidental. But like I said, it's at the end of the day, it's a box with windows. There's only so much room for creativity you can really have before you're going to inevitably start to inadvertently create similarities between other builders' stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I think I like... I'm not going to say mine came out better, but I do like the way my cable cars came out, especially the actual supports for the cables, which we'll get to soon. They look like I'm not going to lie, they look pretty legit. They look pretty tight, guys. I was pretty proud of them. Just saying. So what's going on screen right now? Well, still building the cable car. So I don't really know what to talk about else. Oh, here we go. We're building the cable now. So we built the car. Now we need to build the cable. And then we've got the complete package. So what I did, the single cable wasn't really quite broad enough really for it to look good. Like it looked a bit naff having one cable. So I'm making one cable here, but then we'll stretch it across. It's like a row of 3. I guess, is that what normal cable cars look like? Probably not. But it makes it look thick enough to be believable. And then we can curve it back down at the bottom. And that's it. So I was kind of going, let's slow down. You can kind of go one of two ways of making cable cars. You can either have like a shuttle design, which is what the gondola cable car that's currently on the Steam Workshop is like. The cable car just goes back and forth along the thing, or you can have like a continuous loop, a bit like a traditional ski lift, where the cable like loops around on itself at the top and at the bottom, so the cars are basically just constantly moving and they never stop. And that's the design I went with because I felt like doing that. There was no, pathetic reasoning behind it. I just thought that would be a cool thing to do. And that's what the Alton Towers cable cars are like. We've got to have the obligatory Alton Towers reference in this series at this point. Like, I don't know. It is good. I like cable cars. They're pretty nifty ways of getting around. I think we should try and bring them into like, inner city transportation. New York, the Freedom Tower to the top of the Freedom Tower to the top of the Empire State Building to the top of the Rockefeller Center. You just have a cable car. I don't see any reason why that would be a bad idea. So I'm going to pitch that to the Mayor of London, to the Mayor of New York. London does have cable cars now, actually, over the River Thames. I didn't know that until I was looking up this video at cable car stations, because I have no idea what a cable car station is supposed to look like. And I still didn't really. They all look different. That was probably the most challenging part of this build, actually, was creating a good-looking station. So I basically procrastinated and spent a bunch of time building the platforms to like a really high level of detail so I could try and think about how I was going to enclose the whole thing. I tried loads of different variants that I ended up cutting out of this footage because I didn't want it to go on too long. But long story short, literally, I couldn't really come up with a way of building the enclosure without it looking goofy, because these things are so broad and it has to be so big to accommodate the platform as well. I just created a kind of open air sort of structure. But I'm happy with how it turned out. I hope you guys are also happy when it gets to showing you guys how they came out. So yeah, this is one of the supports pretty much done. Actually, one of the hardest aspects of making these supports for these, like getting those support poles all lined up properly. I'm kind of showing the footage here. I did cut quite a lot of footage out because even playing it back at 12 times speed still took ages. And then I made the realization that I'd have to do the alignment all over again for doing the top bit as well, because the cables are at different angles, and so I had to relay everything I'd done, so I kind of had to do it all over again. So I will cut out, so I'll do like a crossfade at some point, so you don't have to watch me trying to line up those poles again, because that was basically the longest aspect of the construction of that particular thing. I do end up having to do another kind of cable support halfway up the mountain, but that didn't take nearly as long as this one. It still took a while. There was probably a more efficient way of doing this. I just didn't think about it at the time. I didn't think, and then I made things 10 times harder for myself. But it's all right. We're getting there. Just one more support to go. I mean, we'll do some more supports for the actual stations, but those are just flat, so we'd have to worry about getting angles right and all that. So far easier. I think we can all agree. So yeah, I'm using, I think it's the Back to the Future DLC pack. I thought that was going to be the way forward with the DLC with this game. They did like a Back to the Future DLC, a Knight Rider DLC, and a Monsters DLC, where they just added like a car and bits of car and just that sort of thing as a DLC pack. Like, is that going to be the thing? Like they'll do like a Ghostbusters DLC? My God, Frontier, that would be amazing actually. They added the Ghostbusters car. Although I guess I don't really know how the DLC is going to work going forward, because now the Theme Maker's Toolkit is out, so you can just basically import whatever you want into the game. Like you can just make it in Blender. So I don't really know how the DLC is going to work going forward. It's going to be a bit redundant. I don't know if that's because they're starting to wind down development on Planet Coaster and they're going to start working towards some hypothetical Planet Coaster 2 or like another game like Jurassic World Evolution, but not that. Who's to say, really? Or like maybe not DLC, but just have like massive expansion packs, so far broader in scope than the current DLC, which have been admittedly quite big, particularly some of the ones like Vintage Pack. But I mean like actual full-on expansions that would be like 20 quid, but it like adds water parks and zoos, a bit like the RCT3 expansion packs. Something like that. Don't know. Otherwise, I don't really know, because like I'm kind of glad that I deferred the space park I was planning on doing now for making this park, because now I can actually build like rides in Kerbal Space Program, as in like the scenery. I can build stuff in Kerbal Space Program and then import those models into Blender and then convert the Blender models into Planet Coaster assets and actually have the Kerbals in the game and the ships. So that's kind of all, it all worked out pretty well in the end. Things are looking up for the Planet Coaster Matt Lowne series. So yeah, but yeah, the Back to the Future, I realised I was talking about that and then moved away from it. But the wheels, I'm pretty sure the wheels on the cable car guide support things are the, like, you know, in Back to the Future 3, when they have the train car and the train, I guess. They had like that. They put train wheels on the DeLorean. I'm pretty sure those are the wheels there. I could be wrong. They could be just in the base game, but I don't think so. I think those are the Back to the Future wheels. Not that it's really that important. I don't really need to be going into it in too much detail. But yeah, there you go. There is the general cable car track. So then I had to get to actually looping it around. So I'm trying to think of ways of doing it, because the actual curvature of the curve, I suppose, it was like sharper than the length of the cables that I used. Like those cable pieces are far too long, as in they're longer than these iron bar pieces, so I couldn't actually run the cable all the way around it. So I basically sort of janked it a bit and made it look like the cable ran round, but I used a different kind of piece. I used like the steel train track pieces, like the rail pieces, rather than the cable pieces, and I kind of threaded it through like a slit so it looked like it was continuation of the cable, unless you looked really, really close. And we'll hide this under like a roof and bits of support, so you can't really tell. But there you go, you can see it there. I love that. I always say like, oh, it's all right, guys, you can't really tell, but then I draw huge amounts of detail to it in the videos, so it doesn't even matter either way. So I don't know, but I think it came out fine, right? It came out fine, considering it's a static ride, and I think the actual supports themselves, I don't know, I really like the way they came out. They look almost like they could actually be just generic, I don't know, inbuilt supports for an actual ride, rather than just stuff I made from scenery pieces. The downside being these curved bits aren't perfectly round, but the only round shapes in this game that would be the right size are, I think the water wheel was a good size, but the water wheel is obviously wooden and has water buckets along it. Didn't really fit with the modern sleek aesthetic, and all like the cogs and wheels in this game and art pieces, I suppose, they're all too small in diameter, so this was the best solution I could find. You're quite welcome to leave suggestions about what else I could have done, but I'm not going to listen to you because it's done now and I can't be bothered. This is one of the more tedious aspects of this park. Definitely the most difficult aspect of building this park, at least because of the fact that it was really hard to come up with an idea for the station, because there aren't many reference images I could find for what cable car stations look like. So that was a fun challenge to come up with, but in the end I was very happy with how it came out. So yeah, just placing the cable cars along there just to make it look like they're in transit. Not very realistic, given the fact that this ride is hypothetically closed for the story, in air quotes, of this park. They wouldn't just leave them halfway up the slope and stop them and close it there, but whatever. This is like a model village, remember now, like a model scene. It's not a real theme park, is the canon I've now retroactively changed it to. So then, model, you would just like place it halfway up the ramp to make it look like it was there. And then we can dress at the station. I really dragged out the detail in the station to give me as much chance to sort of think about how I was going to build the enclosure. So I'm like, let's just make this really detailed, and I'll be hit with some sort of inspiration as I go along. Didn't happen in the end. I just had to build loads and loads of different station buildings until I found one I was happy with. I wish I could show you them, but I don't want this video to go on too long, so I'll only show you the actual final product for the station buildings. But whatever. And again, I'm going to be cutting out. So if I'm pretty sure I didn't do anything too obnoxious, but if you do suddenly notice the footage jump and loads of it seems to be missing, it's because I tried to streamline the amount of video in this video. Does that make sense? So I don't know. Hopefully it looks fine, right? You can tell I have like really high standards, right? It's like hopefully it looks fine. It's fine. Fine is like the best possible connotation for this series. Yeah, I think it's been like I did mention last time that I was enjoying building this park a lot more than I have for Neptune and Neptune Park and Crimson Tower, because it's much easier to have an end goal in sight, and it's much easier to plan this all out. I did mention in the first episode that I basically drew a little picture of what the park was going to look like, and it has evolved somewhat beyond that image, but for the most part it's a fairly accurate recreation of that. And I think going forward I think this is going to be the new thing, at least for the next few parks I do. So I've already said I want to make a Space Center park, and that's going to be to be honest, a similar, if not smaller scale than Mistletoe Peak. Mistletoe Peak ended up becoming a lot bigger than I ever anticipated, because I just ended up loving it so much, like the actual general aesthetic of building in the winter and the whole Christmassy light. So it sort of became like almost like just a dedicated vintage park that just happened to have a theme of Christmas to it, which is another reason why I kind of want to extend it beyond Christmas, because I was really proud with the end product. And it almost seems like a bit of a shame to just kind of regurgitate it all in like over such a short period of time and not really being able to show it off in kind of, I don't know, the level of detail that I'd perhaps like to, which is kind of another reason why I would be considering dragging this series out to be beyond my initial plan of just the weeks building up to Christmas. And going forward, maybe I could build other themed parks, themed theme parks, like for other seasonal events. Admittedly, I can't think of many outside Halloween and Christmas, because I mean, an Easter park, I don't really know what that would look like outside of Easter eggs. Because I guess it is a Christian festival as well, but it's not quite as, heavily marketed in terms of general mass appeal as, say, Christmas or Halloween. What other things even are there? I guess there's like just summer park, which is something I would like to do. I've kind of always waited. I've really wanted to do a pier park for a very long time, like some kind of coastal park with like a beach and then a giant pier with loads of rides on it, or something like, a soft recreation of Disney's. Is it Pleasure Pier? The one with the Incredicoaster on it, that area there where it's all kind of like a pier, but there's loads of scenery around the pier as well. Something along those lines, but I've always been holding out before doing a part like that. I've always been holding out because I've been hoping that Frontier will add another biome that is just open ocean, so you can build an island. I know that would be hard to execute, because I don't think any of the stock biomes come with water. I don't think there's like an issue with like how you'd raise the island up or expand the island, but maybe just have like a plain flat and you can have it set to water. I don't really know how you could do it, but it's a shame that you basically are locked. You're a bit restricted, because what are like in the current maps, you can basically terraform all the land and make it a giant lake, I suppose, but then as soon as you hit the edges of the map, it just abruptly transitions straight away into just landmass. What RCT3 did, oh, by the way, here's a thing I'm doing. I'm building like a little office. I was actually really proud of how this office came out. What I did was I basically went through the scenery items and just picked out everything that looked vaguely computer-esque and then cobbled everything together once I had them all placed. So looks a bit rubbish at the moment, but I did end up kind of tidying it up. But yeah, like I was saying, what Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 did, which I don't really know why they wouldn't be able to do it with Planet Coaster. There might be a reason. Is that Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 was very similar to Planet Coaster in that the maps were all self-contained, land. There was no ocean map. But if you like terraformed the land at the edges of the map, that kind of... So if you would say hypothetically drop the land level at the edges of the map, that like lowered landmass would be continued outside the areas of the map, like beyond the horizon line. So if you filled it with water, you would then just have an endless expanse of water going off into the distance. Admittedly, the actual land outside the park boundaries was far more simplistic in Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, whereas Planet Coaster has all these like crazy terrain. So Planet Coaster does look better, but if you're trying to do like, I don't know, water or a river or something that goes off the edge of the park, you can't do it. So that's a shame, and it would be nice if they could have kind of adapted Roller Coaster Tycoon 3's model again, if they really are releasing the Theme Makers Toolkit, because they're winding down first party support for expansions of Planet Coaster. Then it's probably unlikely they're going to incorporate this at this point, but one can always hold out hope. But that's the reason why I've always held off doing a summer themed park or a beach themed park, because I'm kind of thinking maybe Frontier will add an ocean biome, and then it doesn't have to look quite so janky as if I kind of made one myself. Like a lot of other guys have made pier parks and beach parks, but you zoom out and you can see the edges of the map and it just looks a bit rubbish. So who knows? Maybe I'll just, swallow my pride and just do it anyway and just accept that it's going to look weird, but as long as you don't look too hard at the edges of the map, it'll be fine. I suppose that's the case with Mistletoe Peak. Like, we've got the actual Mistletoe Peak mountain and the mountains that surround the park, and then it's all just a big flat area that I never actually fleshed out. Admittedly, that's more apathy and laziness on my part. You could totally improve that. But yeah, whatever. I don't know. It's fine. The oceans are a lot more egregious in terms of when you're trying to make a smooth transition from ocean to edge of the park boundaries, I suppose. So I was trying to come up with a design for this cable car station. What I've ultimately got at the top of this mountain is a castle now, so I thought maybe we'll try and make this as like a castle aesthetic, even though it's obviously not going to be part of the castle. It was themed up to look like it was like, part of the castle. It didn't look quite so sticky outy. At the end, I thought, let's just keep it simple. It will just have a modern station design that's all open, just so it doesn't detract from the actual, architecture of the castle, which would be an authentic castle. So it might look a bit naff to then have a very obviously fake modern castle next to it, just trying to replicate the style. Because you see that in there are lots of old listed buildings in the UK that have since had extensions built onto them, and they've always tried to match the architectural style, and it always looks terrible. You can just tell it's not part of the original building. So, I mean, you can do it well. You see places that were bombed out in the Second World War, especially mainland Europe, and it has been built pretty much perfectly. I think England is just full of incompetent people and bureaucracy, and there's no money anywhere. So maybe that's the reason. There's probably a lot of reasons, but that's the thought. It looks a bit naff when you see it in real life, so let's just keep it nice and simple. But obviously for the ground, the actual Christmas village here was all built to look like an old village, even though it was built, let's say 1980s, this place is set, I don't know, just because that's what the cable cars they were designing. So all bets are off. We can build it looking like the same sort of architectural style as the rest of the Christmas village. And at this point I wanted to minimize the amount of work I'd have to do, because again, I was consciously thinking I can't let this series have too much footage to used towards building it, because again, I wanted this series to conclude before Christmas dropped. But now, hopefully before the end of January, this series will be finished. Who knows, really? I don't know, that's for sure. I'm kind of just editing this as I go along, but I appreciate, now I know what the finished product looks like, and knowing where we are now, we got a long way to go. So I don't know, maybe we'll get it all out for Christmas, and I didn't spend as long as I thought I did on a lot of the rides, but let me think. There's 2 roller coasters, there's a track ride, there's loads of more shops, there's lots of things to do, guys. So who knows? Hopefully, like I say, it won't be too much longer, because this isn't really meant to be a big scale thing. So yeah, we talked a lot, but I was at one point talking about ideas I had for other parks. So Space Park was one, some sort of beach themed one was one, and there was another one. Maybe some sort of racetrack themed one, or an abandoned factory that gets turned. If anyone played Roller Coaster Tycoon 2, one of the not custom maps, one of the campaign mode missions was called Factory Capers. And I always liked the idea of recreating Factory Capers in Planet Coaster. Well, originally it was in Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, and that fantasy has since sort of evolved into doing it in Planet Coaster, because I still haven't done it in Roller Coaster Tycoon 3. I mean, not a one-to-one replication of Factory Capers, but something along that theming, where it's an old abandoned steel mill that has been bought by some eccentric, oil baron that wants to just turn it into a roller coaster park. So that'd be kind of a cool idea to do. Or maybe just build something totally unrealistic. I know people have criticized my parks on not being that realistic. I think Mistletoe Peak is not realistic either, actually. But maybe let's just go for just a stupid park, just one with completely unrealistic roller coasters, just a fun mini series, or a hypothetical. It's set 50 years in the future, where technology is way better in terms of designing roller coasters. So designers can just go nuts and do whatever they want. Maybe something like that. Who knows? People would probably hate it, so I probably won't do that. But it's an idea that I have had, and it might go somewhere if I had enough talent to pull it off, which I probably don't, so I probably won't do it. But regardless, that's pretty much wrapping up the end of the construction of the station. I did notice I'd kind of clipped off some of the cabling at the front of the upper station, so I had to quickly retroactively go and fix that. Just painted this roof moulding brown to make it look like it was wood, so it didn't look too, it blended in quite well to the rest of the station building. And there we go. That is pretty much the cable cars done. Obviously, we need to create some sort of method of accessing the cable cars, and I was trying to make it accessible for disabled people as well. I know the irony here is that the actual park itself is not disabled accessible. You have to go up some stairs to actually get into the park, but everything else has disabled access, so I got that going for me at least. So just going to start off with the actual queue to the exit line, I should say. This would also be the disabled entrance, because stairs were required to get the entrance queue, because I couldn't really think of a good place to place the entrance queue. So I kind of had to loop it all the way around the back of the Christmas village up to the raised bit where the Ferris wheel is and start it there. So then I did have to put some steps going down. But I think it is a common thing. I have seen it at theme parks where the disabled entrance is also the exit for everyone else. So I don't know if disabled people would have a problem with that. I guess they might feel a little bit degraded because they're being told they can't use the normal person entrance in air quotes. But logistically, I couldn't think of another good way of elegantly incorporating it. So that was that. So just using the actual spooky walls here. These are the graveyard walls. I'm not sure what their actual purpose is, but they ended up working out as really good foundation structures for the station here. So I can just duplicate this fence along. There was that awkward step there, so I just covered it in the yellow tape. So yeah, that will just mask it and make a sort of makeshift step, so it looks like, it doesn't look too bad. And there we go. There's the actual exit, and then we can get around to doing the entrance queue. And then subsequently, in fact, I don't think we do the exit or entrance queue for the upper station, because again, at this point, I wasn't sure what the top of the peak was going to look like. So let's just focus on the ground, as in ground level, where the rest of the park is. And then at a later date, we can worry about what's going to go at the top of Mistletoe Peak. But again, that's now been done. It's all done, but I don't think we do it in this episode. So yep, just going to run the path all the way up to the top where the Ferris wheel is in a second. And again, I have this big awkward step to get over that stone. So first of all, I just sort of masked out the corners of those white markings. And then we can just use the hazard strips again to create a kind of staircase that is clearly visible. Because again, a lot of this park, people are going to be visiting in the darker hours because it's a winter park. So everything's dark anyway. And also you go for the evening markets and all that. So it's going to be dark. We need all the reflective surfaces to make it nice and safe. There we go. We can finish off the actual pathway going up to the top of that slope there. Add some railings for curved paths that go up and down and all sorts. It's easier just to use the stock railings for the paths rather than trying to create your own. And that's it. There was nothing else to that thought process. I thought about making this bit a bridge at one point, but in the end, it was a little bit too low down. It looked better if I just used the stone walling as before. And that's that, actually. I think we are pretty much, if I just zoom out of my Vegas timeline, we're pretty much approaching the end of this episode. So I hope you guys liked this. I think it's a pretty... I'd say this is fairly unique in terms of what people do in Planet Coaster. I mean, certainly people do make ski lifts in this game, as in fake ones like I have done, but not to this scale, I don't think. I could be wrong. I haven't done that much research, to be honest. But I think it's a nice thing to do, even though it is completely non-functional. It just adds to the overall aesthetic of the park. And as I've said a couple of times in this video now, this is no longer a real park. It's just a model, so it doesn't need to function really. So that's that. Then obviously we can do some lights, because as I said, this park is kind of designed to be kind of visited in the darker hours to make the most of all the lighting and stuff. So we need to put some lights up, obviously, so that people don't just, step in deer poo or something, reindeer poo. I don't know, I didn't think that sentence through. I thought one way of getting a nice finishing touch, again, it makes no sense because the cable cars are stopped, so they probably wouldn't be lit up, but adding some lights inside, the light actually bleeds through the pieces so they look all nicely lit up. And hey, that looks pretty nice, doesn't it just? So we can add some trees and stuff about, but I'm gonna call this the end of the video here. So like I say, hope you enjoyed it. Any suggestions for Planet Coaster in general, or things you want me to talk about, do leave them below. I do read all the comments of Planet Coaster videos, and I hope you look forward to this Saturday's Kerbal video if it comes out, which I haven't got plans of deferring it, but I never quite know because I haven't made anything just yet, so I don't know what it's going to be. But hopefully you enjoy it if it does come out. And yeah, there's going to be some links on screen. Let's put them on screen now. And links to the full playlist, a video chosen for you by YouTube's algorithm. Subscribe, Patreon, all that's in the description. And that's the end of the video. Goodbye.